Here. I'm a little bit sleepy, but I'm here. All right. Got a late start this morning. But, okay, so this is a Portland housing project. They set up this housing. I have some permanent housing over here for the houseless community in Portland. We are at the North Park blocks. And yeah, they're setting up some permanent housing here. There's some tents set up there. And they put some like big bolts in the ground over here. I'm still waking up, so bear with me. I stayed up super late last night. Oh, that pupper! Apparently the cops have been kind of circling, but they haven't like come and talked to anybody yet. If you are in my chats, I can't see the messages for some reason. I need to work on that a little bit, but I can see, if you're on Twitch, then I can see you there. Hey, Uni.
I'm just a press.
You're press. Which company?
Independent media.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Am I in your way?
No, you're good. You're good.
Do you have any questions?
A lot of questions.
Sure. Ask away.
Would you be a person who would have answers?
Some?
We can get you to somebody who has answers.
Why don't you put me in touch with anyone who has answers?
Okay, sure. I just got here. Let me find him.
My question here very much is, I'm having a conflict in my heart between the love of my fellow people on earth, their safety and comfort, and honoring a space in nature, a space for anyone and all people to enjoy freely without disruption. It sounds to many people that when I talk to people, when I bring up this question, most people I've yet encountered, and I've encountered 3 or 4 or 5 separate people right now, and I'm been here long. They consider that I am opposed to homeless people being sheltered. I am not opposed. They also jump to the
houseless camp in Portland.
I'm part of the fact that people aren't housed because that I'm asking a question. Do we need, is it useful to all of us, any of us, these people as well, me, all of us? How useful is it to anyone, everyone, to It hurts my heart that a peaceful, quiet, open space that's been here for hundreds of years, well, maybe not multiple hundreds, over 100, has just been occupied by anyone who hasn't yet. If I can, you know, it's an assumption. It's an assumption. Here's an open space, nobody's, quote, using it, or there's room here, so let's go in there and set up XYZ numbers of tents.
Well, I think people really need to see what's going on. You got $1 million houses.
I understand
and
that.
then this is like, you
Well,
can
I
see
mean,
that there's
yeah, I mean, if you look around, there's, you know, condos
like
and...
this is
All right, now I'm
bullshit.
hearing from you. It's like, for me, no
Well, you're
offense,
asking
I'm
it.
here's
You're asking a
mark.
question,
Here's
and
a
I'm.
question.
I didn't get to answer.
Here's a question.
Okay.
Go for it. I'm not offended.
We're here for it.
It feels to me, no, I could be very wrong here, but that there's some manner of energy coming from you, which is in the zone of people with $1 million houses. God bless us, forgive us all, also these enormous numbers. which is really unnatural. No offense, but true. Is it justification? It's a justification. Someone has $1 million house, so the park should be used for housing. How is that? How do those two things go together?
Can I ask you a question? Where do you suggest that these people go?
I'm out of touch with where the other spaces might be. That is just not my awareness at this moment. I know.
A lot of people are like you.
Here's a point. Let me go here. Let's get creative.
Okay.
Look how many empty buildings are there. Can we put people in an empty building?
That sounds great.
We could.
Yeah.
How could we do that?
But you see, a lot of these people are mentally ill. Too.
I understand that also very well.
Yeah.
I walk the park 4 times a day with my daughter. I hear them through the windows. I encounter them personally, conversationally, on a regular basis. I sit with people on the park, walking up and down the streets. I greet people, I interact, I honor people. I don't interfere with these people, but I recognize they're valid. They are my neighbors. So I encounter them with respect.
Sympathy, empathy, something like that.
Yeah, I give them, I honor them as a valid person on earth, even those that are just like almost unable to move because of the condition they're in. And I'm not talking about, locating their tent.
In my opinion, that people need to be aware of what's going on.
We are
that
aware.
people live like this, and it's not fair.
The houseless population in Portland is growing because this has been, these people's homes for so many years, and the price is going up. The pay isn't increasing enough to cover housing.
Let's say
So
I make $15 an hour.
if
like,
there
I
is
have to
another
spend
option, great. But for
60%
now,
of
they
my
just need a
income
place
on
to
rent.
stay. So that's
a lot of people that are mentally ill or got drug problems. They ain't gonna be able to save up that kind of money to live. Where are they supposed to go? Our government needs the help.
There's a lot of funding going to the police, but there's not enough
guns,
funding
but
going toward housing.
Jesus said you'll always have the poor people, but he didn't say you can't have houses and stuff.
I'm not the one that's setting up the houses. I'm just here seeing what's happening. And okay, I'm gonna go find
I was a Christian for
the person who's kind of in charge, but it looks like he's talking to somebody.
and I was like, well, it just didn't work out. I believe in Christ as a nice person.
Okay,
And,
this conversation is going
follow
toward Christianity. So let me, for those who are just tuning in, we are here with Portland Housing Project. They are putting up homes for the houseless community here in Portland at the North Park block. And they're putting up tents, and they're putting up more permanent housing, bolting down these tent structures over here. Hey, what's up, Brad? And as a lot of you know, the houseless community is growing in Portland because, like I said, this place has been the homes of these people for a long time, and housing prices are going up. Wages are not matching the increase in cost of housing. So, a lot of people are, on the streets doing drugs and all that stuff. But the point, though, is that everybody needs a home. Everybody deserves that. Everybody deserves food and clean water. I'm actually not helping to build these houses. I'm just here. Portland Housing Project asked us to stream, and so I'm going to do some interviews with people who are running this and figure out what's happening. There have been a couple cops apparently drive by, but they haven't messed with this spot yet. Yeah, I need to talk to Mimi.
Yeah, I would love to. Yes, you too.
Hi. I heard you're one of the people who are organizing this. I'm
Yeah.
I'm Carissa.
Carissa, nice to meet you,
Would you
Carissa.
mind chatting with me on my live a little bit? Okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Could you tell us a little bit about what you're setting up here and what gave you the idea and all that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Zave. I'm part of the People's Housing Project.
Zave?
Yes. Yeah, and so what we've done today is we've set up 3 emergency shelters for folks, and we put up some tents as well to help create more of like a community-controlled space. Because like a big issue that we have is like when the city sweeps, which they've been increasing their sweeps, they've been increasing funding to sweeps, and they've been lying about the sweeps they've been doing. They make the situation worse. They destroy people's IDs and belongings. And it's hard to get people supplies when you don't know where they are and they have to keep moving. So what we want to do is we've set up these shelters so people have more of a sense of community. They have a place to stay that's not on the ground, just like a sleeping bag on concrete. We want to continue setting up. These are now the 16th shelters that we've set up in total. So we have 3 here in downtown. We have 13 that are set up out in North Portland that currently house 15 people. And why we started doing this is, I mean, it's hard. I think
It's kind of obvious, yeah.
everyone's aware. By the way, there's a houselessness crisis. There's a housing crisis.
Did
in
y'all
case-
know about that?
Right.
Yeah.
And like Portland declared houselessness a crisis 6 years ago. And in those last 6 years, it has gone worse and worse and worse.
With COVID and people losing their
Especially with
jobs
COVID.
and everything, yeah.
Yeah, we've met several folks who have just become homeless like in the last month. They've been evicted from their places, like they can't afford to live, and this is continuing to increase. And so after waiting this long for the city, I've lived in Portland like 8 or 9 years. I've seen nothing happen. So we got together, a group of us in the community decided like, cool, I'm sick of how the city treats people. I'm sick of people being treated like this. How can we like make the situation better? And what we settled on is like a harm reduction model, because people are going to continue to be houseless, but they shouldn't be thrown to the sides of society. We should be working as a community to integrate their needs, like shelter.
Treat them
mental-
like people, like anybody else.
Exactly, because they are people. I
Yeah.
know the media will say the homeless, and they really try to like, create this separate identity, but they are people too. They're our neighbors.
There's somebody's brother, parent.
Absolutely, like
Kid,
some of these
yeah.
folks have lived here longer than most of us. Like I feel like half the people in Portland have lived here 3 years. Like
Right,
a lot of folks
yeah.
here have lived here 20, 30 years their whole life. They're like more residents than anybody else.
Definitely.
And so that's what we want to do, is to continue to make this situation better and partly give people like material support, like shelters, food and water, while also building political power by like, part of this is a demonstration to the city that there's a lot of community members who don't agree with these policies, who don't agree with sweeps, who don't agree with the brutality against
Right.
houseless people, and they're here to defend and push back on that.
Yeah.
And like that's how we're going to get to the policies we need. Is the city's never going to do it, the government's never going to do it. All of our movements, civil rights, gay rights, labor rights, always come from people organizing and building political power and
Yeah.
building material and economic power. And so definitely stay tuned. We're up to 16 shelters so far.
Wow.
Plus these tents, over 15 people housed. We've got a whole team of volunteers, donors, supporters, and we're going to just keep building. So, if you are hearing this right now, we're People's Housing Project. We're on Instagram.
Can I see your shirt?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah, our little logo's a little faded. It's had some good love.
That's Muse.
Yeah, we're out on the streets. We do public fundraising and education as well.
How many people are with Portland Housing Projects, roughly?
Yeah, so we currently have 6 people who are part of the core team.
Okay.
And then I'd say we've got about 15 people who are like our outer core. And then in terms of raw numbers, we have like over 1,300 followers on Instagram and about over 320 volunteers on our meetup. So anywhere, core team from 6 all the way out to like all of the thousands of people. We have like recurring donors on Patreon as well. So we've got a lot of different realms of support.
I'm still paying attention. I'm just looking for somebody I was talking to earlier.
You're all good.
Chris is also part of our Halo Space team.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for being here.
Of course.
Appreciate it.
I was just going to ask you, there was a woman walking around with her dog. I don't know if she's still here, but she was saying that like she understands that there's a housing crisis in Portland, but she doesn't understand why even though there's, you know, condos and like huge buildings around here, skyscrapers, she doesn't understand why you're setting up here in the park that's been here for over 100 years, and that's supposed to be a space for everybody to walk through. And when I tried to answer her questions that she was asking, she would just like yell at me. So what do you say to those people who oppose, you know, setting up shelters in parks?
Right. I think it's a really valid question. You know, that's why we do a lot of public education. Like, the reality is, like, houselessness is extremely out of control. And, like, that's why I like to use the phrase harm reduction, because we can keep sweeping people all day long. It's wasting our money. It's not doing anything. What we need is to create, like...
They're just moving to other places.
Yeah,
to
they
other
literally
parks.
just come back, like, 2 weeks later. You know, so, like, people aren't allowed... There's nowhere for people to go. So we can either have it completely disorganized and random, which is how we get all of this violence, how we get people with worse mental health, how we have people like starving in our streets for no reason, or like freezing to death overnight.
Yeah.
And it's, to me, it's same with like sex, similar to like sex ed or similar to drug policies. Like, people are gonna have sex, people are gonna do drugs. You can either pretend that they are not, or you can like do harm reduction, make the situation as good as possible. And the reality is, like, this is the fault of the city. The city has over $250 million every single year that it's supposed to allocate to houselessness.
How much?
And over $250 million, and that's just through one bond. They've also increased a lot of money through emergency executive orders.
Okay.
And so we see that they just put $6 million more into sweeps. You
Oh,
know?
wow.
They put $22 million into overnight shelters that people don't want to be at.
That's money that could have supported
Overnight
organizations like yours.
shelters, like,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
what is an overnight shelter going to do? I mean, yeah, it's nice that they probably provide showers and food for one night.
Freezing to death.
For one night, but then
Yeah. But
Not
then
only
a
that,
lot of
but
What do you do
they
after
don't
that?
work because of the oversight, like
Yeah.
Bovado Jail, where they do drug testing and stuff.
Yeah, there's high barrier. It's also like they're really underfunded, so they can be really abusive and unsafe, especially if you're queer, trans.
yeah,
And a lot of folks are houseless, queer, trans youth.
right.
And they
Because their
also-
parents kicked them out because they
Exactly.
didn't like their
Exactly. And they
lifestyles.
face housing
Yeah.
and employment discrimination that makes it hard to get anywhere as well.
That's
So
sad.
like, why we have to do this is we've been left with no other options. Like, would we rather have things like right over there? It's like random setups that are blocking the sidewalk, because that's what's going to keep happening. It's
Yeah, you
already
see that
happening.
everywhere in Portland.
Like, this is one block. It's clearly not being used. Playground is totally fine.
I hardly ever see people out here.
It's,
At the park anyway.
It's like, we need, if the park's for everybody, then we need to use it for what's best for the public. And like, this taking one little block to get people in a centralized place to help support them and create some sense of security, I think is more important than one person playing frisbee when they can go right there and
Or
do it.
having their dog take a dump.
Yeah,
you know?
like, this is going to be, we're in a houseless and housing crisis. We need to act like we are in a crisis, and that means we're going to have to reutilize public land more efficiently.
Right, it's a crisis, and a lot of people are like, I don't really like that woman was like, I don't really like the way that this looks. And she was suggesting,
This place is a sacred place.
yeah, and she was suggesting that,
So sacred
you know,
people
there
should be here.
there are a lot of empty skyscrapers, or like buildings, empty condos that aren't being rented out. Why don't we get people into those buildings? Well, that's up to the person who owns that property. And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. How do we do that?
Right.
Do you know somebody
She wants
who
to help. Correct.
Do you know somebody that is opening up their space for the houseless community to move in? And I've had this conversation with people before, and they're like, it's kind of a liability for the owners, because if something happens and it's on them.
Right.
And also, like, they worry about the trash and stuff like that, so that it just doesn't end up happening.
Right.
Do you know of any places in Portland like that, where somebody's like, hey, I own this giant building, everybody come in? Like, I feel like people think about that, but are owners actually going to do that? Like, they care about profit, obviously, because if they're buying this large building, chances are they care about profit, and they're definitely not making a profit by having the houseless community live in their space. So
that's the whole point behind all the hostile architecture they put outside their buildings.
Yeah.
Correct.
So do you know of any buildings like that are offering a safe place for people on the streets?
I mean, it's like you said, because people like it's not random private people's responsibility. This is really like the responsibility of the public, and the city's never gonna take accountability, but this is like their fault. Like they have, like you said, there's millions of dollars. Like they could be subsidizing people to just have apartments. Like while there is, yes, like there are all those big like spaces we could put people, and I think we should utilize all our tools. Nationwide, for every one houseless person, there are over 31 empty houses. So
Wow.
we don't even need new housing. We don't need to put people in like abandoned buildings. If we put all of the money that we're wasting on police and the military and like policies that don't work and money that disappears, we put that into like subsidizing rent and caseworkers and therapists and drug counselors, like we could be getting people off the street really quickly, and we'd still have 30 units per houseless person nationwide that people can rent out.
Right. It's kind of like that
know?
saying that I saw on social media where it was like, it's great to save people from drowning, but it's better to go upstream and see why they're falling in the first place.
Correct. Right.
Why?
As well.
Yes, preventive, like, mental health, drug abuse. Like, if we fix those two things, I think that would help. I'm not fix, but if we work
Right.
on those two things, I think
Exactly,
that would
and
help
it's
the
hard-
situation.
Exactly,
a ton.
and like that's why we believe in a housing first model, because it's like, you stop doing meth. It's like, cool, I get like beaten up every day, and every night my tent gets attacked by either cops or by other people out here. Like, okay, you stop being traumatized, stop doing drugs right now before you can have housing.
Right. This is something that I kind of went over in my mind last time I went to an event that I was live streaming. Where I think you were there too, where there were like speeches and people were talking from the houseless community about why they're out there and kind of telling their stories. I can't remember the name of the event, but anyway, before I was kind of like on the side of, like, why don't these people stop doing drugs? They could easily, get a job if they quit doing drugs. Like, why don't, that's kind of their issue. But, just hearing these people's stories, they're saying like, my life is so shitty. Like, I don't have a job. I don't have a home. I have to live out here. I get beat up. I've been sexually abused out here.
Yeah.
Sorry, trigger warning. Sorry about that. But for my viewers, but they were, just listening to them talk. They were saying that is their only escape. Like, drugs are the only thing that make them feel good.
Right.
And it's probably proliferating their issues, but if they could get some help from the city and get into a home without that barrier of the fact that they're like having to take a drug test or something, I think they could more easily get out of addiction.
Right. I agree, and I think part of the narrative that's really funny is like, oh, we look down on people because you're using like meth or heroin, but how many people went and like drank alcohol in last week? It's like, oh, these bad drugs over here. It's like, cool, how many of you have had caffeine, alcohol, or weed? Like, we all use drugs. And like, it's okay for some people to abuse alcohol and like, whatever, but people out here who are using drugs to like either self-soothe or they're addicted, or in some cases, like some of these drugs, like speed, are like, they are I forget the exact word, but they help your blood flow. And when it reaches, vasodilator, when it reaches below freezing, like your options sometimes become like, do drugs that are gonna help keep your body warmth circulating, or fucking freeze to death. So people are forced to do drugs to stay alive. And then without any of these support systems like you're mentioning, like it's easy to go wag your finger, like, go stop doing drugs right now. And it's like, cool, I'm freezing. Like you said, all the things you've mentioned, like the suicide rate has gone up every year for 30 years. Like, drug abuse has gone up. And again, we point fingers at the wrong people. Like, this isn't just the drug users. This is like the big pharmaceutical companies that have pushed these drugs out, who've got people hooked on opioids and then cut them off and allowed these cycles of abuse to continue. And I think people, because we see houseless folks, they're the ones who get blamed. We don't see the CEOs and the boardroom executives who are really the ones who are creating the situation. And that's why if you're like, if people are pissed, I don't want people on meth out here either. It's really sad. I had a roommate who started using meth And then she stopped taking her antipsychotic medication, and she assaulted one of my other roommates, and we had to like get her out. And we tried to get her back. She's trans. We tried to get her back to the Queer Resource Center. We tried to connect her to her family. We tried to connect her to a family friend resource she had here. And there was just no way to support her. And like, I don't want her out there. It's really horrible.
Right.
And like, that's where my fury is really, if you're pissed about this, I'm upset too. I don't want her out there. I don't like
That's
that.
why you're out
We're
here.
Seeing this, yeah, it's like we can do something. We need to keep the focus on like the, who's doing this, which class of people, right? It is the ruling class, it is the politicians, the billionaires who hoard all this wealth and force all these problems onto us.
And then
make us fight
they
each
don't want to
other.
see it. They don't want to see
Right.
what they've done.
Straight up.
They're like, can you put them somewhere else? Because now we feel bad about this. We feel bad
Right.
about all the money and privilege that we have.
Right. Yeah, and it's
So-
like people should feel bad, but it's also we shouldn't blame each other. Like we need to get mad and then you get organized. And that is like ultimately what we're doing here is like we were all really fucking mad. Being mad is great. It gets you energized.
Yeah.
But without organization, without community, you're not going to get very far. And trying to beg the city or politicians or big business is not going to do anything on its own. When we come
Right.
together, we build our political power, we build economic power to provide. Like each shelter we set up, the emergency shelters, are only $330 for like the whole unit with the pallets and the insulation. So like, why we do grassroots is only like that can be one person giving $330, or that can be like 10 people giving $30, 11 people giving $30. You know what I mean? Like when we bring our resources together, we can build enough political power that like already today, like we had different cops come in. We had like this community, we had phones on them, we had an organized plan, and we had legislation that said like during a housing crisis, you can build emergency shelters, and the cops left. And the more we can build our power together, like that's how we're gonna get anywhere. Civil
Right.
rights.
And
they
if
didn't
it was just people who didn't have that knowledge and who didn't have a plan in place, the cops probably would have just said, get out of here. And
Right.
like,
Well, that's right. That's what they do to folks over there who set one thing up. So they come and sweep them because there's no organization.
they're not,
know?
they don't know how to defend themselves
Exactly.
with
Leave or
legislation.
we're gonna assault you.
Yeah, we're gonna
Yeah.
take all your stuff, and that's like your ID, your birth certificate, your childhood photos. And so that is same for history. Like I'm gay, I'm queer, and I've been learning a lot about queer history, and they didn't just give us gay rights. They don't just give
No, people are
labor
angry
rights or
and they
civil
fought
rights.
for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like if we want there to be a better world, especially with this housing and houseless crisis, we are gonna have to fight and build power to make it. We're going to have to either do it ourselves, like we've done today. We do people, not permits. We could have waited 5 years for a permit. We can set it up today.
Right.
that's
In
gonna
that 5 years, how many people would have died and not had a house?
Correct.
Yeah.
We can do it today. We can organize. We can build the power to do it ourselves, or force the city government to do it.
So you were saying that there's 22 million in the budget for the houseless community, or for the city to help the houseless?
So there
Is that what you
is a few different things. That 22 million number was an extra amount that the city, either the city or the county, put for these overnight shelters, on top of $5 million for storage, because they're like, oh, we know it's hard for people to move their stuff, so we're gonna make $5 million for storage. That's not the issue. People can't like move around if you're disabled, if you have a dog, if
Right.
you're elderly. Also, how do you get there if you don't have money and the bus doesn't work out?
Yeah.
So that's 20.
And then there's inexperienced people overseeing them, military officers, right? That was the proposition.
That was one of the proposals. Yeah, was from the mayor's office, was to make, they called them like large shelters, like 1,000-person shelters, which as a Jewish person, not to throw all the identity around, as a Jewish person, like I have an issue with the idea of mass concentrating of people.
Yep.
And they were going to put 1,000 houseless people, throw them in these shelters, and have them staffed by unarmed National Guard, which is a militarized concentration camp. And like that's why we're taking this action, is like that's a really escalatory step from the city that they're proposing concentration camps. And like we really need to mobilize, because if we don't challenge that, the city's going to continue.
Yeah. So I don't really know a whole lot of, I haven't like thought through like what we can actually do to help people get into housing. I thought a little bit about it, and I want to hear your idea of it, but I think, yeah, like opening up large buildings and having, or, you know, there, like you said, there's like 30 or something empty buildings for every houseless person. So opening up some type of housing, have counselors, therapists there, have people who can help, help people there at the camper, the housing, who can help people to get off drugs and have, you know, vitamins or whatever they need when they're coming, coming off of these drugs, you know, water, food, of course, and have people there who come through every day and help people learn how to apply for jobs, like, you know, write resumes and stuff like that. But other than that, what do you think would be the best next move? Where do you think that the city could best put funding toward?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I agree with everything you said. You know, we need a really holistic, longitudinal approach to houselessness. Because what the city wants, and we have under capitalism, is like profit return, immediate results, return on investment. And for a lot of folks, it's going to take a long time when you have really traumatized populations. You have people of different abilities, like you have houseless queer youth, you know, you have people who have really severe other mental illness, you have people with schizophrenia who can't fit into cookie cutter things. And for some folks, their ability might not be they can do a 40-hour-a-week job, and that's totally fine. You know, we should really be centering houseless folks. We should be, what can you do? What do you want to do? What are your talents? What is your capacity? And that is a big issue we see with the city, like you've mentioned, is it kind of just comes in and they put whatever policies, there's high barrier things, like everybody has a right to a home. Everybody has a right to support. And people being out here in the streets is not helpful for anyone. So I think I think there's two main steps to really start with. And one of which is similar to what we're doing, where we need to make these camps as safe and organized and functional as possible. You know, so making sure that people have warmth, food, and community, making sure that there are people who come in to check on them, like having people from outside who can help with camp disputes. The thing that really gets brushed over.
Not a National Guard.
Not National Guard. Not National Guard. No National Guard.
No guns. No weapons.
You know, like a thing that gets left over is these are all people. Like imagine if you're living in a random camp with 10 random people. There's a lot of like social politics that go on.
Yeah, I mean, even with my friends who aren't houseless, if we all lived together, we'd probably argue and get into fights, and then you know, not having access to food and showers, that would make me pretty grumpy too.
And you're on drugs, and you don't have access to medication, either mental or physical. A lot of people have like infections, so you compile all those on, you have like a lot of difficult social situations. So part of why I don't like the concentration camp is like, would you get thrown into a random place with 1,000 roommates you don't know? Probably not. But like that's why we also need to make sure, and it's something we continue to learn and integrate, is like people should have power of their community. Like, how do you want this to run? What rules do you all want? If you all here want this to be a sober camp, okay, we're not going to impose that. If you want to create usage policies, great. Like, what we need are houseless folks to have the support networks they need in these camps where they're at today, to create stable, democratic communities. And we also need to be getting people into that housing.
Right.
And currently, there's not much available. And when you have all these barriers, like people need to have IDs, people need to have access to a phone, people can't use these drugs, people have to get a 40-hour job right away.
But they need a home first.
They need all these things first. And it's like, what a lot of people need is like some time to really restore themselves and not have to worry about immediately getting on a job unless that's what they want. You know, personalizing the care to everybody. We need transitional plans. And that is going to be really, we have overarching things. We know everybody needs a house. What each person needs specifically to help them transition into a more stable, more conscientious place is going to depend on them, where they're at, and what they're capable of doing.
Yeah, somebody in the chat said get a job, pay your rent, problem solved. What do you have to say about that?
I mean, yeah, I hear you. A lot of people do really want to like have purposeful employment.
Most people don't want to be without a house.
Yeah, do you think people like living like this? Like, no.
And I'm sure, and I actually have known some houseless people, and I've talked to them about this stuff, and they say that they have tried to get jobs, and they,
You haven't showered for like a month because you can't shower. Do you think you're gonna get hired?
If you don't have an address,
you don't have an address, or you don't have IDs. It's really hard for people to get IDs.
Right, and if you've been on the streets is that okay to say? Is that to say?
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
But if you've been on the streets for say like 6 months or like a year, and they ask for your job history,
right.
like
Correct.
why is there a gap here? And then you have to explain like, I've been houseless for a year. I'm trying to get back on my feet, and they're like, oh, okay, well, there's another applicant who has had a job, and they so
people don't want
The
to hire.
crazy thing is that the
Yeah.
city acknowledges these problems, but they pawn off all of that stuff, like the last 30 years, to organizations, nonprofits, and the community. So you've got organizations like Dress for Success or Cultivate Initiatives, and it's like they just they're expecting it all to just work out or something. Saying, oh yeah, we know this is a problem, but we're just going to shove people to shelters instead.
Yeah. It's like, how are you supposed to manage a job when you don't know where you're going to sleep tonight, or the place you're sleeping can always be, you can be assaulted. It's like, how well of a job is anyone going to do when you have to like fear for your life every single night?
Yeah, and I think what people don't think about, like Alex Jones, is even if you get a job, you have to have it for a certain amount of time to get your paycheck. Right? And you have to be able to make it to your job. You have to be able to shower. You have to be able to pay for the bus, or hopefully you can get help from the city for a bus pass.
You need a phone or computer
But
to apply or find
exactly,
jobs.
if you don't have a phone, how are they going to contact you and say, hey, we're calling you in today, or we changed the time for your shift,
right?
And you don't see that, and then you get fired. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to go online and look for jobs, but what do you do if you don't have a phone or a computer? I mean, I guess you can go to the library, but then you have to worry about getting to the library. It's not as easy as just getting a job and paying your rent.
If it was easier, people would do it. Like, this is where it comes back to, like, I know people do want a purpose. Do people want to be doing meth, like wasting their lives out here? Most of them fucking no. And it also, again, I think people have an idea that it's like everyone's an able-bodied, put-together person who's lazy. And like,
what about somebody in a wheelchair or something?
Right?
Yeah, and it's like, cool. The reality is, like, some people don't want to do anything. Okay, whatever. Most people, like I said, we have high rates of houseless youth, especially queer and trans youth. Like, some of them might not even be old enough to get a job. And like, why are we shaming literal children?
Yeah, we kind of touched on. Say you're 16, you come out as gay to your parents, and your parents kick you out. They're like, you're not the person I raised. Now you're on the streets. What do? You maybe sleep on your friend's couch for a while. That doesn't work out. You hop to the next couch. They throw away your shit, and then you're left without anything, and then you end up on the streets. And then what? Like, you don't have a phone, you don't have resources. You're just a kid out there. Probably going to get into drugs, hanging out with the wrong people, possibly.
Stressed, you're traumatized, like, you're probably being taken advantage of. So you have, youth over here. Like,
and then the trauma builds up because, like, you'll do things that you normally wouldn't just for food or money.
People are for,
to
like,
get by.
a lot of minors. I just did a talk on Sylvia Rivera, who was like a houseless trans woman of color in the 60s who really kicked off like the whole gay rights movement. And like, she was kicked out of her house at 11 years old for being trans.
Oh my god.
And was sex trafficked in order to like make money. And
That's
she ended up, it's really horrible. She ended up, getting arrested, thrown in jail, beaten, trigger warning, all the different all the different things you can imagine.
Yeah, you get out of jail and then, hey, get a job so you can pay your rent.
Yeah, well, now you're a felon.
Yeah.
Who's gonna hire a homeless felon? Like, if this person in the comments wants to hire a homeless felon, like, legitimately, if you know people who want to hire a homeless felon, like, help out. Like, that would be really good. There's so many barriers. No one wants to hire houseless people. No one wants to hire former felons or people who they suspect are on drugs. Like,
yeah.
And in some ways, why would they?
And then
They
that
don't have the money
11-year-old,
for that.
who's gonna hire an 11-year-old?
Right. And so she had to turn, and get trafficked, which she eventually, this is a thing that I think homeless labor gets lost. Like, she founded a group called Street Transvestites Action Revolution.
Well, that's cool that she
And
decided to help the community after
Yeah.
having that happen.
Yeah,
too.
she was there at Stonewall. She helped with gay rights legislation. She created.
What was her name?
Sylvia Rivera.
Sylvia Rivera. That sounds very familiar.
Powerful.
Yeah, okay.
Mama Sylvia. She formed a group called STAR that then housed other houseless trans youth and people, minors being sex trafficked, and then was paying
awesome.
for it by engaging in sex work herself, so that the people she considered herself like their mother, so that like her children didn't have to. And like that's a common thing out here is people are like saving each other's lives. People are turning people. There's a lot of smart business people out here, There's a lot of people who are finding ways to hustle and make money. There are a lot of carpenters, handy people. Like, there's a lot of labor and productivity that houseless folks are doing. They've saved more lives than I know I have, between Narcan and overdose revival. And yeah, there's, like I said, if there wasn't all these stigma and barriers, like, we could create a lot of these opportunities. And again, it's like, cool, are you gonna like make a mean comment on the internet, or like, do you want to show up and help build power?
If you're angry, then maybe think of some ideas and come out and try to
why we
help.
do it, exactly.
Yeah.
That's why we do a community project. Is like, I don't have all of the answers. Like, I have not personally been houseless. I've learned a lot by going and talking and working with folks and like doing what I can to center their perspectives. But, like, really genuinely, like, we're working on a people's health project to get like free mental and physical health out to folks. We're working on like a community garden. We have like the shelter deployments. We have people plugging in all around. And if like you're pissed, you don't know what to do, like, come help.
Maybe start a community garden,
By the
provide
way,
some
you should
food.
come with us to Cultivate Initiatives to see their
I've heard
workforce
about
hub
them.
on Tuesday. We got an
Okay.
appointment at like 2 p.m. or something.
That'd be great, yeah. I know Mimi was telling me about them. You'd mentioned them.
Yeah, it looks like they're doing some really good stuff.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for talking with us,
Yeah.
Zaid, right?
ZAV.
Zave. Zave. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. From People's Housing Project. Thank you so much for your time and for everything that you're doing for the community.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Y'all appreciate it.
Of course. I also love your jacket.
Thank you.
I wanted to tell you earlier, but I didn't want to interrupt you. I love it.
Very much.
All right. Have a good day. My name is Carissa.
Carissa, nice to meet
Yeah,
you,
and I'm
Carissa.
independent media, so I'm like
Awesome.
on
Love to hear it.
social platforms.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll hang out more.
Yeah, awesome. We'll do. All right, we'll go check out this these shelters over here. Like we were talking about, a lot of
Like I said,
a lot of people will set up tents just on the sidewalk, like in front of businesses and stuff, and they'll get hassled, and they're on the sidewalk, so they're in the way of people walking. So I think in the park, there's that issue is not an issue, of course, because there aren't very many people that even come through to this park. I'll see like one person sitting or walking their dog or something, but I rarely ever see anybody just like hanging out at this park. So I don't know, I feel like this is a good spot for shelters. It rains a lot in Portland. I think the precipitation is higher here than it is in Seattle, so I feel like these shelters will be really good for that. I might do one more interview, but does anybody have the time? Hi.
Hi,
Are you the builder?
I'm one of them. Yeah.
Would you mind chatting with me a little bit?
Sure.
Okay, I'm Carissa, independent media. Carissa does. What's your name?
Hi, Krista. I'm Dan Kaufman.
Dan Kaufman. Nice to
Yes.
meet you. Are you with People's Housing Project, or are you just working with
I
them?
work with People's Housing Project. Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
And can you tell me a little bit about the structures that you're building here? It looks like, what is the kind of reflective material on the bottom?
Yeah, well, these are carports that you can buy at a variety of different hardware stores or Harbor Freight, that kind of thing. And
Okay.
with the silver stuff you're looking at here is called Radiant Barrier.
Radiant barrier?
Yeah, and it helps with the moisture that could come up from the bottom.
Oh, okay.
The,
So you don't get like a soggy bed?
yeah, there's going to be a lot of moisture coming up. It's not the be all end all, but it'll help. You know, these structures are basically a tent. You know, it's what people really need is housing. You know,
Right.
But it is a step up. You can stand up and change inside, and a place for some more of your stuff. And then having the tent inside keeps the wind and the rain off, so it's warmer. For the
It's just like an extra barrier to keep the warmth in.
Exactly. And but by themselves, they're without a tent, they're pretty cold. You know, because the wind's just kind of coming in. And then we've got some mummy bags and pillows.
A mummy bag, is it just like a sleeping bag?
Yeah.
Bags. I can tell that's one of the JLHS sleeping bags.
Oh, cool.
Oh,
Like a
good.
whole packet with a pillow?
Oh, we stole some of those from JLHS.
They have better ones too that they don't give out all the time, of course.
Oh, of course. They probably give those to their friends who are going to go backpacking somewhere.
JOH?
No, I've seen.
Oh,
they do
joint,
get their hands on some nice things.
Joint
Joint
Office
Opportunity
of
Housing?
Housing Services? I think?
Homeless services.
Homeless.
Yeah.
Oh, homeless services.
Okay.
Yeah, they're basically a conglomeration of Metro, the city, and the county. I don't think the state's involved per se.
It's a county-run.
It's a county-run office.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, you know more than I.
I go and pick up supplies from them every couple of weeks and drop it off at a mutual aid distro spot. So it's weird seeing like the cycle of things, how the city is both providing the stuff and then they come and take it away later,
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, we'll just give it out later.
bust it all up, and then maybe give people a chance to get it back if anyone in the community will go get it for them, pretty much, fix it up.
So the city is providing like the what is that called again? The roll-ups, the sleeping bags,
Sleeping bags, yeah.
the pillows,
Tents.
and tents and supplies. But then they also are paying. What is their budget? Like
Oh,
$6
they
million
pay rapid
for
response, millions of dollars.
like
on a
$6 million.
contract
I think
to
they have like
come and take it
added
all.
$6 million to the budget so they could do sweeps.
Yeah.
So
And they
that's-
have been doing sweeps, and that's why we're here. Is because folks are being swept. They're saying they're not being swept, but that's not the case, and we have video proof of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
the city's gaslighting.
yeah, they're totally gaslighting.
Yeah, I've
this
seen the
whole
news and they
situation.
say like, oh, we're not doing that right now because there's a housing crisis. But then I see people's live streams of it actually happening. It's like,
Got one
how
from
can
down
you?
the street just yesterday.
Yeah, so we we were trying to and here's the interesting thing about that is that they're like sweeping people, taking their crap, and then here's a tent. So this is your home, your new home.
It's like, where do I go?
Yeah.
Yeah, because legally they're supposed to be providing, reasonable accommodations or something, but
Yeah.
they're supposed to give them a home, a place to go, a place to be warm.
Yeah.
But they just displace them in a different way now.
Right. So you wind up with a new tent and you lose potentially stuff that's really important, like your glasses and your ID and
medications.
medication and money and watches and phones and all these things that are really hard to come by out here.
Well, and it's
Or-
hard to
or
set up
maybe
these things
even-
for a lot of people too.
Or maybe even like your grandfather's watch that he gave you before he died, or
Yeah.
just like sentimental items like that you're never gonna get back.
Exactly, and
messed
we and they, rapid response. There is a expose where they actually put stuff in bags and took it to the dump. We also know that anything valuable,
that was with
it
the
never
airbags.
comes back. So if somebody does have like a gold watch or something, they're not getting
Somebody's
that back.
gonna take it.
And
Yeah.
and then oftentimes they'll hold the stuff for like a month and it's wet and it's in a plastic bag. So just imagine your stuff getting it back after it's been held for a month. It's ruined. Your clothes, your sleeping bag, whatever the things are. So yeah, one of the things that we're doing right now is we bolt this down, and you can see right here. So we bolt this to the pallets. So
Okay,
there's
and
9
then this is just
yeah.
like one of those pallets, or is it
Well, these
like
are
a
custom
solid
pallets
piece of
that
wood?
we get.
Okay.
So, So they actually have a plywood top
Okay.
and Camelus pallets. So shout out to them because they're great.
Camelus?
Camelus. They have
Camelus.
2 locations in the Portland area.
Are they donating or you're paying for them?
We pay for them, but they're very helpful, and so we work with them to buy these and have them made special with a plywood top, so that you can imagine a regular pallet wouldn't work so great.
Yeah.
And then we put 9 together. We cover it with the radiant barrier. Then we fasten these there. And we have gone through, we've had 50-mile-an-hour winds on these things up in St. John's.
50 miles per hour winds,
At
wow.
Jason Barnes Landing. That's the main camp. Oh, there's my dad. Hey, how was church?
All right, I'm gonna zip up my coat really quick. Are you part of Portland Housing Project as well?
I am just a volunteer.
Okay, cool. And did you find out from a friend about this or?
Well, I've been volunteering, cleaning up, doing the cleanup at the camp up by the boat for a couple months. And then I helped the prep for this.
So we got a tent inside.
We did it at somebody's driveway. We just helped, doing like some of the basic structures so it wouldn't take them as long because the quicker obviously we use, the quicker, I guess.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've been doing this for a few months.
What is your name?
My name is Liz.
Liz. I'm Carissa.
Hi, Carissa.
Nice to meet you. What are you cutting right now?
So these are the bolts that are holding down these tents, holding down the bars. So like,
Okay.
with wind and
So
stuff.
cutting
this
them
makes
like
a little bit more sturdy.
6
Yeah,
inches
so
or
I've
something.
broken this as I'm doing this, which is
I
like
like that. That's a really nice, simple method.
yes, like the easiest,
Little straps and
Yeah,
screws.
what's easier is better, and
Yeah, I brought these big lag screws in case anybody needed to secure something larger to the ground, but there's no holes in the pallet, so it doesn't really work.
yeah, it's they're really actually like the way that they do set these up and like the stuff that the solutions that they've come up with are pretty I don't say ingenious, but like and even honestly some of the best solutions that we've gotten are from the people who are living in them. Because like even these ones are like tilted down, so if the rain comes, then
Yeah.
that's not ideal.
Yeah, I guess that would be the best way to figure it out, like
Right,
what you would
no,
need,
and
because
that's-
if people have been, living outside for 6 months even, you're like,
100%.
what have been some issues with your housing?
No, and we were standing around having a little like discussion, and like actually came up with a pretty good idea. But then we talked to the chief, and he was like, he suggested just like doing like a wood
The pallet?
4x4s, and it was like, oh, that's a great idea. And sorry, I wanted to keep it super easy, but yeah, it's just
We don't want to distract you too much.
no, it's fine. It's just as someone who has almost been in a situation like this, it's hard not to do it.
Yeah, definitely. We had a lady come through the park, and she was saying like she doesn't understand why the setup has to be here.
The lady with the purple hat.
Yes. I was
Did
talking
she
to her a
have
little
any
bit.
better ideas?
Well, she was saying that we should put up people in all the empty buildings and the condos, and I was like, that's a great idea. How do we do that? The people who own those probably don't want houseless people moving in, but how do we get them to?
There's so many other problems and things that would need to happen for that to be a viable solution. Did she have solutions for that?
No, she's like, I don't really have solutions, but I just don't really like
I just
seeing.
have complaints.
She doesn't like seeing this in a
Yeah.
park that's been here for over 100 years.
Do you
And then I
enjoy
tried
seeing
to.
people living on the street, like
Yeah,
if
and
you
I was.
don't have a productive solution, like I don't want to say close your mouth, but like
Don't complain unless you have solutions.
Right,
like we're
And
angry
also,
about
there's
it
always
too.
an easy first solution, which is to give up your money and privilege, right?
But also,
Yeah.
like, have a little empathy. Like, can you imagine living on the street? Have you? And then, even if you haven't come close to it, like, how do you not look at people, like, and have any empathy? Put yourselves in their shoes for a minute, and like, then like, yeah, help, and like, because also like,
Coming in complaining to the people who are.
yes, complain to the people in
Like,
charge.
how do you do that?
Like, Yeah, I don't understand that. And also, like, if you're also coming at a place of hostility, you're not going to change people's minds.
Yeah,
People
she
like
was.
that, yeah,
She was asking me questions, and I was trying to ask her more questions. And when I started talking, she'd be like, "I don't really like your energy, how you're coming at me." And I'm
Yes,
like, I wasn't coming at you with any bad energy. I was
Rational question.
Yeah.
He's not somebody whose mind you're going to change, and
Right.
see people like that. I don't.
There are just a lot of people who have privilege, white
Yeah.
privilege, and money, and like you said, haven't been close to being without a home. They want to take their dog for a walk through the park, and they don't like seeing this.
Yeah, and
Well, if you don't like seeing it, then maybe try to be part of the solution and not
Right.
complain.
I don't think the people living in these tents enjoy this. I'm sure that
Yeah.
they would rather, and like, yeah. And also, when you're aggressive like that, you're not changing anybody's mind. You know,
Right.
I heard her talking to some people. It's not worth the conversation.
I would say that she's a Karen, but I feel like that word is overused. But that was the vibe that I initially got. Like, as soon as she opened her mouth, I was like, okay,
Yeah,
I know where this is
caught a little
going.
bit of that when she was talking to somebody else. When people are aggressive like that, the conversation's pointless. You're
Yeah.
not changing people's minds.
Right. Maybe use your privilege to help.
Use that anger, like whatever, to go talk to people who can maybe actually do something about it, not people who are trying to do something about it.
Right. Maybe talk to city council. Like,
Yeah.
if you're angry about it, if you think this is ugly, talk to city council and say,
Yeah.
what can we do?
You know what's funny
Volunteer
is you
at a
never
shelter.
see those people on the city
No.
council meetings. You see like the houseless people
Yes.
calling in
And the people like who are
people
the
like-
people that
yeah,
who are
people
doing
like
this,
here.
you know. It's take a day off and go make sandwiches at a shelter, like do something, you know. Yeah.
And I think that there are even people on my live stream who are getting angry, and they're saying things like, get a job, pay your rent, and they're getting frustrated because they don't like to see it either. It makes them feel uncomfortable because they're sitting in their home with their jobs. It makes them feel uncomfortable. They're like, how do you get to that space? Well, maybe have
Volunteer your address so these people have an address to send papers to.
yeah,
Or
like
something
you said, have empathy, see things from their perspective, and maybe try to understand why they're in this situation. Did you want to tell us a little bit more about the setup? She told us about the brackets, and you told us about the pallets.
Yeah. So sorry I had to
Thank
run.
you. Thank you for talking with me,
Sorry I had
Liz.
to run off. Thanks, Liz, for backing up.
Oh, I see.
So that was kind of, I invited my folks to come down there. They do First Presbyterian Church, and I just kind of feel like this. We had a rabbi and her congregation here today, and like I just want to like help take some of the fear out of interacting with people who live on the street. They're the ones who suffer most from the violence that's happening out here, often perpetrated by housed people. So, my folks are great people, and but of course, just like everybody, can have their concerns about it. So just being able to invite them down here and show what we're doing felt really good.
So were they supportive of?
Oh yeah, yeah,
housing?
they're supportive. But with concerns,
Right.
Like everybody has, and we fear the unknown. I'm afraid this problem actually is going to get worse, a lot worse.
Yeah.
So
I think we're going to start seeing the repercussions of, COVID and like people not having jobs for so long. Like, I think
yeah,
it will
absolutely,
get
especially when
worse.
evictions
More
start happening.
evictions. Yep.
Yep. So that's
The
the thing too.
protections
Is
are
we've
being
got
lifted.
to keep people who have housing already in their house. And once you get evicted, it's really hard to get a place back.
Trying to figure out
Hi.
where to put your things.
Yeah. So
I kind of want to talk to more people from the community.
why don't you
and
do that?
But I'll be back.
I got work to do too. So
Okay. Thank you so much for
Thanks
chatting
for
with
being
us.
here.
What was your name again?
It's Dan.
Dan?
Yeah.
From Portland Housing Project. Thank
Yep.
you so much for what you're doing.
Yeah,
and-
Jason Barnes Landing. Been working closely with Mimi Gurman for many years, and this is not like a single group effort. There was a lot of folks who made this happen today. Yeah,
Cool.
including you.
Mimi's told us about you actually. We're with Halo's thing.
Oh,
Yeah, we're building space on
Do you mind if I record
Sure,
the
yeah.
conversation?
If the city, are you okay? can use public land to set up safe spaces for people.
And are the yellow shelters meant to be that someone would put
They're
their tent inside there
inside.
and they would have more room?
And they have more room. It sets up like 2 rooms for them to be in. It's cleaner. You know,
Yes.
it looks a lot better. The other thing that we do is weekly cleanups. So we come around to the camps that we set them up in, and we clean them up, which really helps everybody around. You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
What have you met with any resistance?
Yes, we have. Yeah, we've had the police here and we've had park rangers here. Not really wanting us to be here, but as we know, the police don't want the people anywhere. But people do have to exist somewhere. So we're just trying to help them have a stable place so that they then can get into permanent housing.
Do you think this will go to court? They oppose it so much that you'll...
I don't know what's going to happen. We'll see what they do. Though we're hoping to just hold it for as long as we can.
Usually they'll sweep.
They usually
camp.
do sweeps. The hope is that this is going to make a sweep harder. It's going to make the sweep more expensive. When the sweeps happen, the police throw away all of the person's belongings, including their IDs and any paperwork. And every time it happens, they have to start over from scratch.
If you don't have a permanent address, you can't get
Yeah.
ID.
Exactly. And so there aren't like the money that the city has that we all pay for.
Yeah.
that we've passed laws to pay for. The city has something like $400 million for the housing crisis that our city. Yeah, and you know, Dan Ryan said that he promised safe housing sites all over the county, and promised that there would be 6 up by the end of 2020. There are 2 that existed previously. The other 4 haven't.
And what is there? Do people just sort of, govern themselves? I know, like across the street on the next corner, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Lots of noise because lots loud music, you know, all that. So, how do you make this safer?
Safer place. Yeah. So one of the people who will be moving into a shelter has agreed to in this. And so that's what we're trying to like help support smaller democratic communities so that kind of stuff can be like safer and taken care of. Because you know, even like most of the people living in tents nearby also don't want money. And you know, like it's a small few that make a big ruckus.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me listen in. I'm Carissa, just independent media. Thank you. All right. Well, I think I'm gonna head out. I have a chakra brunch to go to with yoga. Thank you for listening in and watching the interviews. Again, this is North Park Blocks in Portland, Oregon. Portland Housing Project is putting up these structures. Some of them are like little carports with tents inside because it rains a lot in Portland. They have these pallets with, I forget what it's called. Do you remember, anybody in the chat? What they put over the pallets to keep the moisture from the ground from getting into the tent so that when they wake up, their like butt's not wet. But that's a smart idea. There have been a couple community members, like people who live around here, who don't really like the idea of having this set up in the park. And I think that some volunteers from the Portland Housing Project are doing a good job of kind of explaining what's going on and educating the public too. So yeah, just the education aspect is there. They'd like to make this more of like a democratic kind of self-regulating camp. And I think they have several camps up around Portland that they're helping with. Yeah, I think it's really cool and interesting. I'm not like an expert on aid for the houseless in Portland, but I'm learning more. And I don't know if you know, but I am helping to build a co-space / kind of hub for making things to help out the houseless, like heaters and blankets, and kind of like a maker space in Southeast Portland. So I'll be working with these organizations a little bit more, working with Halo Space to do that. And we're already like giving out water to camps and doing that sort of thing. And we want to provide more resources to the houseless in Portland too. So it'll be a fun journey, and we hope to help out the community and get the people who are already out on the streets these resources, and hopefully help them to get into more permanent housing. So yep, that's what I'm doing this morning, and gonna head out. Thanks again. Peace, love, donuts.